This poor high schooler just got wrecked by truck going, and when he opens his eyes, he's in an ice-sky world where magic is real and water obeys his every thought. But what he doesn't know is that he has a hidden trait, one that makes him ageless. Rio Mahara died. The realization didn't come with pain or fear. It simply was. He opened his eyes to find himself drifting in a pure white void, empty, silent, and endless. Confused, he tried to speak, but his voice barely echoed before a warm, calm presence approached. The figure that emerged wasn't God, at least not exactly. Not by his own claim. A being with an otherworldly calmness introduced himself as Michael, an angel, if that made more sense to Rio. With no mission to fulfill, no burdens to carry, Michael's only instruction for the reborn soul was simple: live however you like. For the first time in his life, or afterlife, Rio could choose peace. No school, no obligations, no society bearing down on him. He wanted a slow life. Michael granted it. A peaceful cottage in a forest called London, in a new world named FAI, surrounded by nature, protected by a barrier, and blessed with 2 months' worth of food. Rio had an affinity for water magic, which suited him perfectly. Magic existed here, after all. The moment Rio blinked and arrived in the new world, he realized this wasn't a dream. No furniture, no sound, just a house, 2 books, and a knife on the table. He stepped outside. Towering mountains framed the horizon. The wind was cool, and the magic was tangible. When he whispered, "Come forth, water," a tiny splash appeared in his hand. It was real. The books explained the rest: basic monster lore, plant properties, and an introduction to elemental manipulation. He discovered he didn't even need to chant incantations aloud, thinking the spell worked just as well. That was slightly disappointing. No cool shouting of spell names. Still, the practical applications were endless. He filled the tub with water and realized how cold it was. Without any firewood or matches, he considered alternatives. Visualizing the water molecules, he forced hydrogen bonds to form. Ice. That ice, he discovered, could function as a crude magnifier to focus sunlight. Fire. Hot water. A bath. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his. In that steaming tub, surrounded by nothing but wilderness, Rio felt the reality of his new beginning. But the slow life wasn't free. His food stock would run out in 2 months. The forest beyond the barrier was teeming with monsters. A knife wouldn't cut it, literally. He needed offensive magic. Waterball was his first attempt. It worked, but barely. A small blob of water popped weakly against a tree. Harmless. So he refined the spell. Narrower, faster, sharper. Water jet. The idea of slicing water, pressurized like a blade. Eventually, after hours of effort, a thin stream cut into bark. Progress, but still wasn't enough. Next came ice. He visualized ice forming midair, pulling water molecules from the atmosphere and freezing them in place. It was slower, harder, but possible. He learned to shape spears of ice, icicle lance. Yet they didn't fly like water spells did. Too heavy, too unstable. Still, he trained, hour after hour. Even as his mana drained and exhaustion hit him like a hammer, he pushed forward. If Water Ball wouldn't save him, and Water Jet wasn't strong enough, then Icicle Lance would be his last resort. He had no time to waste. Rio stepped beyond the barrier for the first time. At the riverbank, he found a rocks he'd hoped for: quartz. A perfect backup for starting fires if mana ran dry. He scouted for medicinal herbs, hopeful for a simple, peaceful errand. But peace was not what FAI offered. From the bushes, a lesser boar emerged, snarling, tusked, and fast. Rio's body froze. His mind screamed to run, but his feet disobeyed. Until they didn't. A second before impact, he rolled to the side. Ice. Instinctively, he froze the ground beneath the boar. It slipped, while the beast struggled to stand. Rio conjured spears of ice and launched them. The monster was pierced, silenced, and stilled. Rio collapsed, panting. His first kill, his first survival. His slow life was already demanding his best. Back home, he studied the monster encyclopedia. Lesser boars were the weakest. That terrifying foe, a bottom-tier creature. And the stronger ones? Dragons, capable of raising cities. Demons, creatures with no defined origin, capable of warping the world. He shuddered and read on. Every page offered more nightmares. Still, he returned to the forest. The next day brought sweet fruit and more bitter truths. Just as he bit into a juicy, tangy delight, the skies parted with terror. A black-feathered shadow dove, assassin hawk, invisible wind magic, sharp-beaked charges. He was knocked flat before he even saw it coming. He couldn't outrun it. Cornered, Rio used what little magic he had. Ice crystals surrounded the bird, trapping it temporarily. One of its eyes was pierced. The creature screamed and fled. Rio lay on the ground, aching, breathless. That slow life was starting to sound like a lie. Worse, in running from the assassin hawk, he lost track of his home. Still, somehow he made it back. Night fell, and something called to him. Curiosity, perhaps fate. A headless knight, tending its horse by moonlight. A Dullahan, not listed in the monster encyclopedia. Perhaps too dangerous to categorize. Or perhaps not a monster at all. Rio returned again. And again. Night after night, he watched it. Fought it. Lost to it. But something inside him shifted. The Dullahan never attacked to kill. It trained him. Tested him. Then, one night, it created a sword of ice. It held it out. Rio stepped forward. The knight vanished. In his hands, he held a weapon born not from rage, but from growth. A sword made of water, honed through silent challenge. Peace didn't last. While training, Rio sensed something. Familiar. Dangerous. The assassin hawk. But different. Its feathers were darker. Its body, larger. It had evolved, and it wanted revenge. 5 layers of ice wall, shattered. 10 layers, obliterated. Even icicle lance failed. Then the sword, his last hope. It clashed with the bird's charge. For the first time, his strike landed true. They fought. Blade versus beak. Ice versus wind. Magic and instinct in deadly collision. Finally, he pierced it again. The assassin hawk fell. Rio stood over it, breathing heavily. He saw it clearly now. This enemy hadn't returned for vengeance. It returned to test him, like the Dullahan, to make him stronger. "Thanks," he whispered. He gave it a respectful end. And then the world grew quiet again, until the voice echoed inside his mind. A dragon, a being of overwhelming power, speaking calmly through telepathy. Rio, stunned, responded. He confessed he'd fought and killed the evolved assassin hawk. The dragon, named Lewin, wasn't angry. In fact, he was impressed. He noticed Rio's sword, the gift from the Dullahan, and recognized it immediately. The Fairy King's sword, a relic of immense value, a mark of being chosen. Rio didn't know how or why he had it. Lewin smiled, then vanished. Rio stood still, overwhelmed. He just had a conversation with the dragon. Back in the white void, Michael stared at Rio's slab. He'd overlooked something, a hidden trait, so rare it hadn't appeared in 10,000 years. Agelessness. Rio Mahara, reborn into FAI, could now live forever. Not just slowly, eternally. Rio had only left the house to check on some grilled monster fish. What he got instead was chaos. The beach was a wreck. Tosco's voice cut through the confusion, relieved that Rio was okay. But Rio didn't understand. His senses hadn't picked up anything off. More importantly, what was with this outfit? Wasn't there something more appropriate? Before he could get caught up in thoughts about clothing, the unfamiliar boy nearby sat up and introduced himself. Abel. That's who this was. Abel was surprised. Rio had saved him, right? Rio casually explained. He'd only carried Abel back to his house. And unfortunately, Abel had been the only one he managed to rescue. So there were others then. Abel's expression stiffened. Others had been washed ashore too. But Rio dismissed it. They were smugglers, he said. Not worth worrying about. And that was that. There wasn't much to do except eat. So they did. As they sat together, Abel introduced himself more fully, and Rio did the same. Rio, a water attribute mage. Abel was impressed, not just by the name, but by the meat. It was grilled well, and apparently hunted personally. Abel asked about the knife, curious if Rio hunted with that tiny thing. Rio clarified, it wasn't a weapon, just a tool for dismantling. Magic was his real weapon. Magic. Abel said that even in the central countries, only about half of the people could use it. Half. That clashed with what Michael had told him. Wasn't it 1 in 5? Rio paused, confused, but he shook it off. When Abel asked if Rio had any other clothes, the answer was blunt. No. No cloth. No thread. No money. Abel chuckled. He might have just insulted the man who saved his life. Still, they kept eating, joking, relaxing. Then Abel turned serious. He wanted to check the coastline. Rio agreed without resistance. But along the way, Abel noticed something strange. Rio didn't have a staff. A mage without a staff? That was unusual. Abel shrugged it off. Maybe Rio was just down on his luck. Then came the real request. Abel wanted to head north toward the town of Lon. He had no idea where he was, no map, no bearings. He wanted Rio to act as a guide. Rio thought about it. He'd been living a peaceful, isolated life. This was a detour, but in the end, he accepted. They'd leave tomorrow. Before the journey could begin, Rio had one last thing to do. That night, he stepped out alone. He had someone to meet, a presence he could only approach at this hour. The being never responded, but he always felt it listening. Tonight, he offered his thanks. He told it he'd be leaving the forest of London for a while. He didn't know what kind of being it was. Spirit? Guardian? It didn't matter. He'd survived this long thanks to it. And tonight, to honor their last meeting, he went all out in his magic practice. It was his way of saying farewell. Morning came. The two departed. Abel took the lead and asked Rio to stay back. He wanted to fight first if anything happened. He couldn't just keep being protected. It was about pride. Rio nodded. That made sense. Then a noise ahead made them freeze. Lizardmen, tough enemies, especially in wetland terrain. Abel suggested they lure them into the forest. It didn't work. They were being chased. They had to fight. Rio wasted no time. He summoned 4 icicle lances at once. Abel was stunned, not just by the magic, but by how many Rio conjured at once. Normally, magic activated 1 at a time per chant, but Rio didn't know that. For him, this was normal. As the battle settled, Rio conjured clean water. Hydration was important. He used to chant out loud this time. Abel noticed. Wasn't Rio silent the first time? Rio brushed it off. Maybe Abel was imagining things. They kept walking. Abel showed Rio a coin, 1 florin. Currency from the kingdom of Nightlay. Nightlay, a strong-sounding name. Apparently, every country in the Central Nations had its own currency, though the units stayed the same. Nightlay was one of 3 major powers. The others? The Dabuhi Empire and the Handel Confederation. Dabuhi? Rio couldn't stop laughing. That name was awful. Abel wasn't amused. But he agreed a country's name mattered. I'm from Dabuhi didn't sound great. Visibility improved. Then came trouble. Rock golems. They'd stumbled into a nest. Abel attacked with Electro Strike, but it regenerated. Rio stepped up. He cast Ice Wall and used mass compression. The resulting impact took out 2 golems in one shot. Abel was stunned. A weapon based on mass manipulation? They cleared out the remaining golems. One fell and stopped moving, likely because it lost its link to the earth. Rio inspected the body and found something inside, a magic stone. Massive and deep-colored. It had been absorbing mana from monsters for ages. A rare find. Too bad they couldn't retrieve the others. Suddenly, the ground shook. A giant creature approached, a behemoth. Neither of them had seen one before. Then came another, a wyvern. A clash was coming, and they were front-row spectators. They watched in awe as the 2 monsters collided. Rio rooted for the behemoth, nicknaming it Bichon. The battle didn't last long. Magic nullification occurred. The wyvern's presence vanished. Rio sighed. He wanted to see round 2. Abel rolled his eyes, but the moment wasn't over. Magic nullification, a concept Rio had heard of. It appeared in dungeon traps. Abel brought it up. Was Rio interested in dungeons? Of course. What kind of fantasy fan wasn't? Abel casually mentioned that the only dungeon in the Central Nations was in Lon. Rio lost it. Why didn't Abel say that sooner? He demanded more information. Abel complied. He explained the 3 major races. Dwarves, strong, skilled blacksmiths. Some even lived in Lon. Elves, more mysterious. Most lived in remote forest settlements. Only 1 elf resided in Lon, just as Rio imagined. As they climbed the northern mountains, Abel asked where Rio got all this information. Rio hesitated. He couldn't exactly explain that it came from a higher being beyond mortal comprehension. He simply said, best not to ask. Abel didn't push. They were lucky to be alive after all. Still, Abel noted that the magical presence of that behemoth was terrifying. If it had attacked, they'd be dead. Reports said behemoths and griffins hadn't been seen in centuries. This land was unusual. Rio took offense. Maybe people just hadn't tried hard enough. Abel grew more serious. The wyvern they saw, it likely came from the northern sky. That confirmed something. The mountain range acted as a lid, a natural barrier preventing monsters from flooding human lands. And now they were inside it. Abel didn't want to be right, but now they had a problem. They couldn't just walk around the wyverns. Eventually, they'd have to fight. Rio didn't hesitate. He offered a plan: ground the wyvern first, then strike. Abel agreed. If it stayed airborne, they were doomed. Rio took position, calm, focused. He summoned another volley of icicle lance. For spears launched upward and struck true. The wyvern plummeted to the ground. Abel blinked. It was over. That was too fast. Wasn't this supposed to be a thrilling, blood-pumping fight? Rio teased him. Didn't he want action? Abel shut it down. That was perfect. Efficient. Let's do that every time. Rio nodded. All right then. Let's clear out the entire wyvern swarm. Abel didn't argue. Just charge forward. Yep. Rio thought to himself. Abel really was a battle maniac. The skies cleared. The path ahead lay open. But their journey was far from over. Monsters, dungeons, secrets, and perhaps something far more powerful waiting in the shadows. And neither of them yet knew that Rio was ageless. It started with a hike, a mountain, and 3 dirt-smeared survivors smelling like fried wyvern guts. After an unexpected wyvern-slaughtering rampage, Ryoma and his unlucky companions stumbled across a highway. Yes, a road, which meant civilization. Civilization meant people. People meant taxes. And Ryoma had about as much social currency as a fart in a funeral. But Abel, the human equivalent of a thank you for not dying certificate, decided to vouch for him again. The man had already shelled out a silver coin to smuggle Ryoma's sorry face into the previous town, and now he was dragging him toward the Adventurers Guild like a proud parent, introducing their problem child to daycare. And Ryoma, that sleazy rat, was just excited to sleep in a bed and shovel whatever foreign peasant cuisine this fantasy dump had to offer down his throat. Too bad his hopes of peace were dashed by the curse of good curry. Because when Abel introduced him to the local delicacy, the moment Ryoma's tongue hit the spice-laced sauce, he nearly sobbed like a divorced salaryman eating instant ramen. Curry, a sacred food for every trucked ice guy reject. And it was already here. His entire protagonist arc just got shortcut. Of course, the filthy glutton demanded seconds. Morning came, and the disgusting freeloader was dragged to the Adventurers Guild like a toddler getting vaccinated. Abel explained the basics: register, get a card, avoid town entry taxes, and maybe sell some monster parts. Ryoma, whose ID situation was more questionable than a guy at a nightclub with no shoes, nodded along while pretending not to owe Abel his entire reincarnated life. Naturally, Ryoma had questions. Mainly, how the hell a curry stand existed before he could even invent fire. Abel tried to dodge the culinary inquisition, but Ryoma wasn't letting that slide. The curry conspiracy was real, and if Abel was hiding that, what else was the bastard hoarding? Sweets? Secrets? Women? Ryoma demanded dessert like a gremlin. As the gang trudged into the golden wheat-laced town of Lund, Abel got ambushed by familiar faces. Guards, friends, random background extras, all shrieking like groupies at a washed-up pop star. Apparently, Abel had gone full Houdini on them. Missing in action, assumed dead, probably eaten by a dragon. The usual. But now he was back, alive, scuffed, and blessed with a new companion who looked like a sleep-deprived cultist with clean water magic. Ryoma got side-eyed by half the town as Abel flexed his mysterious savior card like a proud dad, showing off his kid's macaroni art. The gossip mill was churning. The Crimson Sword, Lund's strongest adventuring party, was back, and they brought a weird new recruit. People whispered, judged, eyeballed. Ryoma just stood there, breathing through his mouth and pretending to be humble. The guild was a noisy dungeon of praise and rank-checking braggarts. Abel's return triggered a reunion scream fest loud enough to wake the dead. So Ryoma waited in the corner like the world's most awkward potted plant. But even in the chaos, the real battle was just beginning, because it was time to register this water-dribbling nobody as an actual adventurer. Abel, not content with saving Ryoma's sorry life, decided to recommend him for D rank, skipping the F rank trash tier. Normally this required a legendary reputation, a monster-slaying resume, or maybe a bribe. But Abel had proof, a massive, fat, ominous wyvern magic stone that looked like it could power an entire nation, or a mid-tier boss fight. The guild master, Humac Glass, a grumpy geezer with stress wrinkles sharper than his wit, nearly shit bricks when he saw it. Wyverns were national-level threats, apocalypse-tier creatures. Slaying one was like punching a hurricane in the face and living to brag about it. Even more shocking, Ryoma and Abel had crossed the Demon Mountain, alone, unarmed, and with no sense of self-preservation. That alone was enough to bump Ryoma out of loser tier and into mid-rank legend status. In the face of all that absurdity, the guild had no choice but to accept him. Ryoma, the grease-slicked mystery mage, was now officially a D-rank adventurer. Next came the bureaucratic hell known as registration. A lady named Nina, clearly too professional to deal with creeps like Ryoma, walked him through the process like he was a confused hobo learning how to use a vending machine. Name? Ryoma. Job? Mage. Element? Water. Residence? Homeless trash pile. She even offered him a bed in the guild dorm for the next 300 days. Ryoma, suppressing his inner perv, somehow refrained from asking if it was co-ed. As Nina explained guild rules, dungeon seminars, and magical seminars Ryoma could sponge knowledge from, he just nodded like an obedient mutt. When she finally handed him the crystal to register his mana signature, the guy nearly trembled from excitement. Finally, a card with his name on it. Something to prove he wasn't just a socially awkward freak with a god complex. Ryoma stared at his new adventurer card like it was a platinum condom. And just like that, the slime-streaked mage was now official. But Abel wasn't done dragging Ryoma around like an overachieving parent on a tour. Next stop, the Magician's Guild, home of arcane nerds, insufferable scholars, and mages who actually showered. It was here that Ryoma would meet someone dangerous, Kalia, the Water Mage Guild Master. A woman with the magical chops and icy gaze to make a man spontaneously combust from a glance. Abel hyped Ryoma like a sleazy talent agent introducing his next one-hit wonder. Kalia asked for a demonstration. Ryoma didn't hesitate. Water ball, and like magic, and yes, literal magic, he conjured a perfect water orb on the spot. Not a janky blob, not a leaking balloon, a tight, dense, precision-crafted sphere of watery doom. Kalia practically moaned. Self-taught? Bullshit. She offered him a seat at the magical round table immediately. The guild would fund his research, unlock high-level materials, and give him access to top mages. Ryoma accepted like a starving simp being handed a buffet. His registration was fast-tracked. ID handed over. Magical signature recorded. Within minutes, this once silent sewer rat was now part of the Magician's Guild, with Kalia personally guiding him to the library like a proud mad scientist taking in her next experiment. And damn was she impressed. His water magic density? Impeccable. Mana control? Flawless. Potential? Off the charts. Kalia was ready to shape this dirty, dripping prodigy into a magical menace. Back at the inn, Ryoma rejoined Abel, and the two settled into some end-of-day reflection. Curry was on the menu again, because of course it was, and Ryoma started nerding out like a lunatic with a lab coat. He wanted to know the origin of magic, the philosophy behind mana, the secrets of divine intervention. Abel, meanwhile, just wanted him to shut up and eat. Apparently, magic came from the gods, or from humans, or both. Nobody really knew, but Ryoma was hooked. A full-on scholar mage in the making, ready to dissect, analyze, and maybe even redefine magic as they knew it. Abel warned him not to overdo it. Ryoma, ignoring every red flag ever, said he'd train harder. And so the day ended with a steaming plate of curry, two unlikely companions, and one rising pervy powerhouse of a mage who'd gone from nameless nobody to guild-registered prodigy in less than 24 hours. Amon was a trembling twig of nerves, a wet tissue of a man, already sweating buckets before the sun even hit noon. This sorry sack of anxiety had survived 5 days of baby tier training, but now it was time for real dungeoneering, something his noodle-spined soul clearly wasn't built for. The instructor barked the final warnings, throwing words like first layer and monster outbreak into the wind like candy at a funeral. Everyone else, they were hyped. Meanwhile, Amon was mentally writing his will on toilet paper. Rio, the enigmatic bastard with a talent for being too cool for the room, lobbed in a loaded question about teleportation like some smug ice guy nerd who read too many wiki articles. The others practically drooled in admiration. Even though it was just a pre-dungeon Q&A, the warning signs were flashing bright red, a great beast outbreak that could turn this peaceful little adventuring town into Monster Mash 3000. But the instructors, these heartless lizards, just shrugged. Not today, they said, as if tomorrow was any safer. The entry ritual was skipped like it was a sequel to a game no one wanted to play. No logs, no prayers, just a long march into the gaping black of the first floor. Amon tried deep breathing, likely inhaled more dust than courage. What followed was as basic as tutorial dungeons get. One creepy crawly soldier ant, as if the dungeon gods themselves thought this crew was too pathetic for anything else. Rio, the ice-slinging cheat code, popped off a magic spell with the grace of a final boss, freezing the enemy mid-scurry. Amon then stumbled forward and somehow, by sheer miracle or pity of the gods, landed a clean cut. Congratulations. The ant was dead. The noobs were now real adventurers. And the magic stone? A tiny chunk of proof that Amon wasn't just a sack of meat waiting to be eaten. Cue celebration time. A party so tame it wouldn't even get a nun tipsy. No alcohol, no ecchi waitresses, just clinking mugs of sad adventurer juice and awkward compliments. Amon tried to give credit to Rio, but Rio was having none of that modesty BS. If you kill a bug, you own it like a champ. That's the adventurer way. They discussed dungeon plans for tomorrow like they were organizing a beach trip, even though they had the combined courage of a wet mop. Rio planned to hit the 3rd floor, which made Amon light up like a dog hearing the word walk. Then came the plot twist. Those ants weren't supposed to be on the 1st floor. According to the guild, bats were the main baddies here. But apparently, ants had started digging up lately. Naturally, this weirdness wasn't allowed to sit peacefully. Enter Abel, the smug-faced red blade himself, oozing that I'm too good for this town energy. He casually explained the ants' tunneling behavior, then threw shade at Rio like a master of passive-aggressive warfare. Abel didn't just talk down. He practically teabagged the entire room with his elite adventurer energy. Mills, the fresh-off-the-bus F-class swordsman, nearly creamed himself asking for a handshake. It was like a boy meeting his favorite hentai artist. But then things spiraled into pure chaos. Abel, that beautiful bastard, tried to slip away from his guild duties like a guilty one-night stand. Horan, his handler with the patience of a pissed-off teacher, dragged him away by the scruff of his cloak. As Abel screamed like a spoiled toddler, Rio stood there like an emotionally detached wallflower. Abel's cries of betrayal echoed like a cat being vacuumed, leaving behind a wave of second-hand embarrassment and bruised pride. Rahia, the quiet girl with eyes that could undress a soul, praised Rio softly. Rin, meanwhile, called him out for being weirdly calm, which was fair. Rio had the emotional output of a rock. But deep under all that stoicism, something was bubbling. Later, Amon flexed his blade skills in front of an impressed senior, slicing through enemies like a wannabe samurai with daddy issues. His movements mirrored Abel's, because apparently, the guy learned from a retired old fart named Old Man Yellow. Yes, that was his real name. Probably. Turns out Old Man Yellow trained at one of the royal capital's big shot sword dojos, meaning Amon's rural moves weren't entirely trashed here. Meanwhile, Rio revealed he wasn't just some stick-waving mage. He knew his way around a blade, too, trained by a mentor but mostly self-taught. A walking contradiction, this guy? Magic, sword, mystery aura. No wonder everyone was either terrified or horny for him. The advice from the mentor lady was simple: don't die. Build endurance. Run like hell. If you collapse, you're not cool, you're corpse meat. Apparently, even Abel used to jog his sword nerd shoulders in the morning. Geniuses, it seems, still had to sweat. Rio, being the mysterious lone wolf he is, didn't stick around. No dungeon run for him today. He had a different kind of battlefield in mind, the library. Yeah, the library. Because nothing says main character energy like reading alone in a dusty book dungeon while your shoulder still throbs from a demon duel. Books on alchemy, recipes, magic formulas, the whole nerd buffet. Rio wanted them all, but that price tag was staring at him like a mafia debt collector. Before he could figure out how to rob a bookstore without ruining his edgy mystique, everything changed. A solar eclipse blanketed the world in instant dread. A creepy power slithered through the air, thick enough to give a goat PTSD. Then she arrived. Leonore Uraka Albuquerque, a name longer than her patience. A demon disguised as a smug hottie with enough attitude to level a city block. Her power reeked of boss fight energy, and she wanted one thing: Rio's head on a stick. Too bad Rio wasn't interested in being anyone's kebab today. They clashed like two gods at a cosplay convention. Magic, wind, flames, and sass flying everywhere. Her robe-crushing blades met Rio's Fairy King gear, which apparently had enough plot armor to block an entire magic nuke. Their fight escalated to absurdity. Rio, for all his edge and mystery, barely survived. Her healing factor was cracked, her speed was busted, and her mouth wouldn't shut up. Eventually, the space began to collapse, something about it being a bath, which was either metaphorical or just proof that demons are pervs too. Before she vanished, Leonore dropped one final promise. She'd be back, and next time, she'd kill him personally. Great. Another Yandere added to the collection. Rio stumbled out of the magical mess, barely holding himself together. His Fairy King robe was MVP, having absorbed enough damage to make a tank blush. Still, he hurt like hell. His mind was scrambled eggs, and all he wanted now were books and silence. At the bank, he found a fat deposit waiting for him. Payment for that wyvern magic stone. It was so much money, it practically made him moist. No more worrying about rent. No more desperate quests for pocket change. He was now officially too rich to care. Back at the inn, the roommates finally returned. They greeted him like a long-lost lover, only to find out Rio had been out getting stabbed by a demon in a magical bath. He brushed it off like a scratched knee. But Rahia? Her gentle touch was the only healing magic he needed. She patched him up, whispered sweet nothings, and hit him with the guilt trip of a lifetime. You're important to us now. Oof, right in the emotional scrotum. Even Amon and Rin admitted they were worried. And for once, Rio let the cold edge of his voice thaw into a simple, thank you. He was home. Broken, bruised, maybe bleeding internally. But home. The squad decided. Tomorrow, they'd hit the dungeon again. This time, to the 4th floor. With teamwork. With courage. With borderline suicidal confidence. But in some distant palace, schemers were already whispering about the great calamity. Cities were crumbling. Craters were opening up like hell's zippers. And even the elite were starting to sweat. And in the middle of it all, that boy. That loser-looking, mysterious, overpowered freak who took down a demon in a magical hot spring and then went to buy books like it was just another Tuesday. The calamity was coming. And Rio? He'd be waiting with blade, spell, and dead-eyed sarcasm.